Jarius, RA Ancient Rome Live. Today our webinar is Kids Q&A, and we're talking specifically about the myths associated with the foundation of Rome. Why? Because the birthday of Rome is April 21st, 753 BC. How in the world do the Romans arrive at that date? How do they conclude, and ultimately, how is it then that the archaeological evidence seems to back up that time period in the 8th century BCE? So we're going to cover some of these basic things. I look forward to your questions as we move through it. So if you have a question, please do. Okay, you couldn't hear the tram. Well, please do let us know as we move forward here. I'm going to be looking at the chat line all the time. So rather than raise a hand, please just pop it in the Q&A. And in fact, yeah, I'd love to see the questions keep on rolling in. So what we have is behind me this SheWolf, and if you're not familiar with the story is quite famous, but it is good to know that we see here behind me 1 and 2 twins, and they're being suckled by a SheWolf. Why? Well, when you look at ancient civilizations and you look at mythology and legends and traditions in ways in which the founders of cities throughout the Mediterranean were oftentimes associated with having special relationships with the gods. One of the ways in which you can underline that special relationship is obviously to show images of that city founder or that hero as being stronger, more masculine, what have you, than the average person. Another way is to tie them in to having special relationships with the gods. And why not even be related to the gods? And so that then means that those founders of those cities throughout the Mediterranean were not just average people, but people endowed with special powers, special abilities, special support from the deities. And Rome was one of those cities. And what they chose to do was they had a number of different gods and cultures that they could reflect upon and depend upon, borrow from, and obviously in the end go their own way. So what we have here then is a great symbol of ancient Rome, a SheWolf, a female wolf that's going to suckle Romulus and Remus, who were abandoned. They were destined to found a city. Romulus is the ultimate founder. His brother dies, or in some cases even Romulus kills him. But the fact that the twins at a very young age were endowed with this special connection to a SheWolf means that that milk that went into them was something supercharged. I mean, think about then for a second, many other city-states had children abandoned in the wilderness, protected, taken care of, fed by wild creatures. I think immediately of this guy named Telephus. Maybe you've never heard of Telephus, but you probably have heard of Romulus. Romulus suckled by a SheWolf, Telephus suckled by a doe, so a female deer. And in either case, it's not just by chance that these creatures adopt these human babies, but rather it's because a god has sent a creature to take care of these human babies that were destined for greatness, that our children are descended from gods, and so forth. And that is a story then that the Romans give to their city founder. Because think about it. The milk from a cow, the milk from a goat, the milk from a sheep, the milk from a SheWolf. So you're thinking about the brutal force, strength, and violence of a wolf. You're giving some very incredible attributes then through the milk to the city founder. And that's just a great symbol, right? It's like if you go back to American history And they said, what should our national bird be? And Benjamin Franklin said, a turkey. And yeah, we'll go with the bald eagle. So again, think about what you're trying to convey to the people around you, to your enemies, to the fellow citizens, and you think then about that kind of appearance and what an eagle signifies. And the Romans had an eagle as well. I mean, everyone has an eagle in so many cultures because they're powerful birds. The turkey, also a native to North America, doesn't convey those same kind of attributes. So that's really where we need to bring it back down into. So the Romans rally, like us, we rally around images, we rally around ideas in our own cultures today. And this SheWolf was a great example. Now, when we start to look at the way in which the Romans are defining themselves and talking about their origins, we can go back and look at the stories. But the best preserved stories that we have written down really are around 2,000 years ago, which is a way off the mark from, let's say, the middle of the 8th century BCE, when the Romans said that their city was founded. And if we want to go back a little closer to the time, we can stretch it back to about the 2nd century BCE, so 2,200 years ago, where we have not a lot of great sources, but we have mentionings of, from various authors, mostly Greek, that are telling us about the origins of the Romans. And from those stories, you're getting many, many interpretations and many, many attributes. In fact, a lot of Greek authors say that the Romans actually started off as a Greek city, and that's where they got their start. And the Romans, over time, as their literature forms and their writing becomes more prominent and their power in the Mediterranean becomes more prominent, then you have a push for their own ideas and their own identity, uniquely Roman. But make no mistake, the Romans didn't live in a bubble along the Tiber River. They were always interacting with people. The Philistines, the Etruscans, Greek traders, the Sabines. So again, they're interacting with lots and lots of Italic people. They're interacting with Latin people. And ultimately, they say that they are descended from Latins in another town. And that town is Alba Longa. But the reason why they're located in this area and take themselves back to stories of the Trojan Wars and around 1200 BCE is because they latch on to various well-established stories that were prevalent in Greek society. So you get a whole bunch of ways in which you're identifying yourself and looking at the people around you and saying, I'm kind of like you, but I'm different, and therefore I'm going to start telling my story in my own way, tapping in and picking and choosing from a lot of great ideas. So that's one of the things you really want to keep in mind. And when we finally see the SheWolf in art, it's really around 300 BCE, not really before. So a lot of these ideas, sure, there's a lot of oral tradition, a lot of things that are passed down from father to son and mother to daughter, and it's not being written down. But when it's finally written down, we're seeing the SheWolf appear in art, her statue in the Roman Forum itself. It's way, way after these purported oral traditions, these purported stories about the foundation. So it really is something where we have to balance a lot of different resources. Let me see here for any update on questions. What type of evidence supports the myth of Romulus ever existing? I believe the twins were added later to the SheWolf from something I read. Absolutely correct. In fact, we're going to talk about the date of those two things together. Yes, it's about the symbolism. When you say SheWolf, do you mean lady wolf or a new animal entirely? Yes, typically the way we're saying SheWolf, we just refer to a female wolf. And in Latin, it's a lupa. And so the thing about the statue right here is I mean, imagine how things change. When I was a student, everyone looked at that statue and said, it's really old. Maybe it's the first original bronze statue of ancient Rome, 6th century BCE, 5th century BCE, 4th century BCE, and so on. We know that those twins to that statue, they were definitely added in the Renaissance times. So we have that fine. And we know where the statue came from. The statue was donated to where it is today in the Capitoline Museums by Sixtus IV in 1471. But before then, where was it? Who made it? And so forth. So as studies have progressed and you have analysis of the type of bronze that makes up this statue and the way in which it was created, it turns out in just basically from the late 90s to early studies in the early 2000s that this statue actually dates to, say, around the 13th century. So imagine studying something as a student, as a graduate student, and being told it's around 600 BCE, 400 BCE, and now all these new scientific tests say it's 1300 CE. So you're off by 2,000 years. Unbelievable. But still, even though that's the case, this is a precious document. It's a very important symbol of the city in the early Renaissance times and so forth. And we do have plenty of evidence of the she-wolf, this female wolf, suckling the twins. We have literary sources that put it in the Roman form. We have it on coins. We have it in art. So obviously, in the Republican period and throughout the imperial period, it was a grand symbol of the city of Rome. It's just that this one, at this point, we feel definitively we can say it was not ancient. So that's just a little, basically a big side point. So let's pick it up here again, and I'm happy to obviously take more questions. Great response. Demonstrates science. The science is still going on, and with the digs and research ongoing on Rome, I totally dig it. Thank you, Daniel. So yes, I think that's important to underline the fact that all this stuff, everything that you learn in the history books, something from the past, is in a sense a work in progress, because in so many instances we can bring new information. We have new ideas. People come up with different concepts. They test our hypotheses. Archaeological evidence, new evidence is unearthed all the time. Things are in storerooms that then get studied by a graduate student or someone doing a research project that brings another piece of that jigsaw puzzle that then can radically sometimes shift our ideas. It shakes the foundations of what we thought we knew. That's exactly what happened with the she-wolf. And you that are students, in whatever field you study, don't take anything as the final thing. Always question, always dig deeper. And particularly that's what makes, to me, history and archaeology so fascinating, as there's some other way to look at them. There's another perspective we can attain. And oftentimes it can come from science. Nowadays it can be using new data sets. I mean, it's really exciting. And that's what I think makes this field just really worth it to get involved with. So again, the she-wolf appears on coins and on statues. This one here, maybe 13th century, even if not older. Greek historians, we have a lot of them writing about the Roman tradition themselves. Who are these people that have defeated us in all of our great city-states by the middle of the 2nd century BCE? Where do they come from? A lot of the Greek historians said, they're one of us. They're far removed, but remember, Greeks were colonizing Sicily and southern Italy already in the 8th century BCE when Rome was being founded. So there's a long tradition and mix and match of ideas. And another part of this story, the real fundamental one that gets canonized, let's say, is that the idea of Aeneas, the Trojan prince, the son of a goddess, Aphrodite or Venus, escapes and ends up in Italy. Those ideas were prevalent. The wanderings of Odysseus were prevalent thanks to the Odyssey and already very much accepted and well known. And you see Aeneas appearing in art in Sicily, in southern Italy, from the 6th century BCE. And then you kind of bring the story of Romulus, the founding of Rome, and where he's actually coming from, because he had to come from somewhere if he's going to go off and found his own city. And those cities that he's associated with in his story is that he's born in Alba Longa, a descendant of the kings that descended from Aeneas, and Aeneas who married Lavinia and founded a city called Lavinium. So here are two cities that should be older than Rome, but archaeologically doesn't seem that they are. And the story then that ties in Aeneas to Alba Longa to Lavinium doesn't seem to really be older archaeologically than 300 BCE, although there's a possibility that some of these oral traditions were somewhat older. But keep in mind always the Romans interacting with a lot of people. They're encountering Greek culture early on. They're accepting Greek gods like Apollo and Castor and Pollux already in the 5th century BCE. And then we get the story about there's a guy, Evander, who's living in what will be Rome. And he's coming across Hercules, who passes by what will be Rome on one of his 12 labors. And then Aeneas shows up, and Aeneas is talking with Evander. And this gets, again, canonized in the Aeneid, the great epic tale of Aeneas, which is really a combination of the Iliad and the Odyssey. There's the war part, and then there's the travel part. But Virgil, in his genius, reverses it. So you've got the travel part first, and then the war is the second part of the Aeneid. So it's a kind of an Odyssey first, and then an Iliad. And the exciting thing, I think, about all of this then is when we look at the Roman authors as they sort of push into the scene, not so much in the middle of the 2nd century BCE, as a little bit later, really in 100 BCE and 50 BCE, and you're getting people like Varro, who is studying everything available to him, that you're starting to hone in on this idea of 754 and finally 753 BCE. One scholar put it up very succinctly. Just imagine if 509 BCE is the foundation of the Republic, 509 BCE, go back 7 generations, 35 years per generation, and you're going to come up with 754. That's Vera's kind of calculation, and it's not a bad calculation. And I will show you also. I wanted to say a word about 2 scholars that you can take a look at. So here's one great book. See if that's going to show up right there. The Beginnings of Rome by T.J. Cornell. That's a great classic book. It's a little dense, but if you want to find out more, this is a great place to start. The Beginnings of Rome by T.G. Cornell. And another book, it's in Italian, but this is one of these kind of definitive studies. This has the scientific evaluation of the very SheWolf that's right behind me. This is a great publication, La Lupa Capitolina, and it's well worth a study. Or I don't actually know if there is an English translation to that, but it's cited by a lot of people. I think it's well worth it. Who was the most popular god in ancient Rome for the people of ancient Rome? Ooh, that's a great question. Well, it's tough. I think Hercules was always very popular, and of course, the main god, the king of the gods, is Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Yeah, I'm using the word CE. So basically, I think a lot of us grew up with BC and AD, which we need when we're talking about ancient Rome because the city is founded in 753 BC. Nowadays, I think it's more prevalent, more common in scholarship, and I think it's trickling down. People say BCE and CE, which means before Common Era and Common Era. So versus before Christ and Anno Domini in the year of the Lord. So it's just a I guess, Christian reference that's pretty standard. Do you think that Romans latched onto the Trojan story so as to connect themselves to the classical dominant Greek culture in the Mediterranean world? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, yeah, why not? I mean, this is definitely something where, the Romans in the end are going to go their own way. And I think by latching onto that particular cycle of events in mythology, the Romans then very deftly latch into that dominant Greek culture, as you said, but they're doing it their own way. So they're also saying, we're non-Greeks, we're something else. And that really is what Rome was all about. They were something else, something different. Every culture has its stories, absolutely. Every culture has its stories, and that's what kind of unifies people. We have our, you grow up with our mythology, our stories of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. I cannot tell a lie. And he chops down the cherry tree and so forth. So we rally around these figures, these great deeds, and then they kind of accrete, kind of gather up and learn and have other things attached to it, true or not. I heard that, they said that, did you know that? And think about the oral tradition. Then the beautiful thing I think about looking at Rome and looking at these stories and how they create meaning over time and meant different things to different people, Republican Rome versus Imperial Rome, is that a lot of it is based upon definitely a strong oral tradition that was developed, because that's how people passed down the stories initially. And then finally, we have the archaeological evidence. And that is the real kicker. That's the real interesting thing, is that you can look at the archaeology on the Palatine Hill, on the hill of the Quirinal Hill, the Esquiline Hill, and so forth. And you see this amalgam of all these different threads that come together. Now, did Romulus exist? A city's got to have a founder, and other cities throughout the Mediterranean, they had tombs of those founders, and we're looking for the tomb of Romulus or whatnot, and there's some sort of cenotaph, some sort of marker was discovered in recent times underneath the doorway of the Imperial Curia, which could be even just a marker. I don't think it's this tomb per se, but there is this tradition, and you do want to have that memory. Societies have tombs of the soldier, they have monuments to city founders, and I think that the Romans, were doing that long before we're doing it today. Were the Romans influenced by anyone else besides the Greeks? Oh, we have a big long list. But I definitely think we want to point a finger at the Etruscans. We could spend a lot of time talking about the Etruscans. A lot of people are fans about the Etruscans. A lot of people say, who? Who are the Etruscans? So these are the people living in Tuscany, and the closest, the southernmost Etruscan city was only about 6 miles from Rome. I mean, it's that close. And in fact, that's the first city of the Etruscans that the Romans wipe out in 396 BC or 396 BCE. And so that's something to keep in mind, that the Romans, again, are not living in a protective bubble. They don't have a big shield around them. Sure, they have a wall, the Servian wall, but you're trading with people on a daily basis. You're interacting with people. There are trade routes going past through the Via Salaria, going on to the salt pans, where we're going to have Ostia Antica at the mouth of the Tiber River. So there's a lot of flow of ideas and people, and they're docking the ships for the Tiber Island, and there's a lot of commerce that we see documented in the excavation site of Santa Mabono, which is going back to the 7th century BC. And so there's a lot of ideas, and with the ideas and culture, it's art, it's imagery, and that's why also very early on in Rome's history, you do have the Hercules, that is Heracles, and you have Castor and Pollux, and you have Apollo, and you have Asclepius, and so on. It's because these are prevalent ideas in a lot of the cities, not all the way over there in what we call Greece today, but just down south, Campania, Naples, Neapolis, all these great city-states, the great city-state of Syracuse, the kingdom of Syracuse, that eventually dominates all of Sicily, and is essentially going to be involved in the First Punic War, Carthage against Rome. So here's Carthage, a very big power, but the Romans didn't draw so much from them. They maybe took some Melkart version of Hercules, but they tended to shy away from that, and really more definitively we're looking at Greek models italic models. Italic models, they themselves filter through with Greek ideas. The Etruscans, of course, also dealing with the Greeks, but doing things in their own distinct way. So we have to give a lot of credit to the sense of self-identification of the Romans, as every city-state had its own identity. The SheWolf, it wasn't not like every town out there had a SheWolf suckling the twins, and then of course they're identical twins. So which one will be stronger? The better will be the one that founds the city, and the other one, he looks like a carbon copy, but actually he didn't have the right stuff. So that's why goodbye Remus, and we're left with Romulus. So those are some ideas I think that we're talking about. Great questions from a lot of people. The least favorite god. That's a toughie. That's a toughie. I'd have to think for a second. But definitely. I don't know. It's a tough one. Listen, the Romans covered all the bases. They even had shrines venerating deities whose names they didn't even know. Hey, I just want to cover all the bases here. So all those gods that I didn't even mention, I'm making an offering to you too, just so we don't like make you mad. So the Romans really tried to venerate everyone and everything. Do you need to make a distinction between the science versus the story and tradition? I think for the Romans you didn't. And in fact, if we move forward in time and we're talking about, say, the time of Cicero, who's doing all these great writings, or even the writings of Julius Caesar. I mean, Julius Caesar is a noted atheist, and yet he's the Pontifex Maximus, keeping up with traditions. He didn't have to believe according to that religious system. He wasn't obliged to go to church on Sunday or something like that, but he still took place at the head of the most important priestly college, and he went through the rites and observances. But sincerity in that system wasn't actually one of the tenets. It wasn't a requirement. It was doing the ritual properly. So they have different ideas about that. And yes, they did come to terms with, we can have our tradition, we can have our myths, we can have our gods, and then we can adhere to a philosophical school, which can be all about the negation of any deities. And that's what, again, Cicero, who's in priestly colleges, is writing about. A lot of these ideas, Epicureans and Stoics, but he's coming to terms with that in his own way as well in his writings, that we can have both, that this is what each one of these things serves. So that's a lot of things we could get into in the future. So what I love is, I think these are great questions. Will a replay of this be posted soon? I'm gonna put it up today. Sydney with the most famous myth. Well, I think it probably is the one of the SheWolf and the eventual founding of the city, and Romulus building his walls and killing his brother. I think there are a lot of great things here. I think this is absolutely fabulous questions. Great dynamic. That's what this is here to be, a question and answer, and also to have this back and forth. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it very much. Please go to our YouTube channel. It's doing really well, getting a lot of interaction with people as well. All of these videos go on our YouTube channel. We Dig Rome. I think you'll enjoy it very much. Some related content on my new YouTube channel, Darius R.A. Diggs. You can check that out as well, like the video of the Pantheon. And we're going to be pushing forward a whole bunch more content in the coming weeks. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be out and about again through Rome to take you to the ancient sites live. Thank you guys very much.